Chapter 2. The couch had been stripped bare. Its 3 cushions lay scattered on the floor, built into a semicircle. The one nearest the kitchen housed a purple gem. It had been doused in water and rubbed clean, but still bore slight nicks and scratches. In the cushion's center of the 3 was a pale oval gem. Stephen had given it extra attention to get it clean. Connie, too, who'd rubbed it down with her eyeglasses rag. It felt right for her gem. On the last cushion sat 2 gems, blue and red. Stephen had touched their edges together. He imagined it was a scary and lonely process regenerating without each other. He hoped they could sense how close the other was. The semicircle connected in on itself, forming a complete loop, by a medium-sized wire dog crate. It was bolted shut. Inside sat the bundled couch blanket, sacrificed by Connie for the night. It was wound around the green gem, making for a snuggly nest. It would have looked comfortable, if not for the wire grating surrounding it.
You sure I should just leave you here like this, kiddo?
Greg paced around the display. He prodded an uneasy sandal against the dog crate. It was mesh wiring, hard, cold, and gray. Its edges were bound by twirled strands of thicker, darker metal.
Should I be asking you who she is?
Stephen sat cross-legged in the center of the display, his sandal edges scuffed against the flooring, tracking streaks of mud that had crusted on his feet. He pulled Amethyst's cushion to flood it with a patch of sunlight. "That's Peridot, Dad." Greg's face slipped to a paler white. He lowered himself onto his haunches beside Stephen.
The gem with the huge spaceship who tried to take you away? That Peridot?
Greg manually turned Stephen, both hands set to his son's shoulders.
Stephen, I love and trust you, but this is... I don't think I can have you looking after something that tried to kill you.
Stephen shrugged his dad's hands off his shoulder, slipping them into his own. "Dad, Peridot doesn't have the ship anymore. We crashed that. And it was Jasper who wanted to take us away. She's not here. It's just Peridot. And she's got no weapons. And she's hurt." Stephen motioned outward. "And now she's in the crate."
When you asked for a crate, I thought maybe you found a possum or a raccoon or...
Greg cut himself off, anxious eyes back to the strange display of blanket and gem and dog cage.
How can you be sure that's gonna hold her?
"Well, Amethyst was messed up pretty bad when her gem cracked. And it looks like Peridot's is worse. I don't think she'll be trying to fight anything when she reforms." Stephen twisted his fingers together, glancing back at the cracked gem. "If she reforms." "Mr. Universe?" Stephen and Greg looked up. Connie stood by the door, bag hoisted over her shoulder, a sun hat and her nightgown on. She watched them with apologetic eyes. "I know this is really important, what you and Stephen are talking about, but my parents are starting to get annoyed, and if my mom gets annoyed, she might say I can't ever come back over. She already thinks I do dangerous stuff here. If I get home late, she might..."
"Oh, that's right. I'm supposed to be taking you home, aren't I?"
Greg answered. He stood, hand to neck. He glanced at Connie, then back down at Stephen. His jaw worked itself in worried circles.
"Can't you just maybe take the ride back with us?"
Stephen shook his head. "I'm a crystal gem. I need to stay here and look after everybody."
"Including Peridot?"
Stephen crossed his arms and huffed. "Including Peridot." Greg tried for a smile. He reached a hand down for Stephen to take.
"Just so you know, I'd trust my life to guard an amethyst and pearl in a heartbeat, but this, whatever this is, it took them out, Stephen. Peridot did this to them, and Peridot almost took you away from me. You gotta understand why I don't like the idea of any of this."
Stephen stared at his father's hand, contemplating, and took it in his grasp. Instead of standing, though, he pulled Greg lower. Greg gave a quick tug of resistance before bending at the waist. He silently focused on Stephen's other hand, which pointed into Peridot's cage. "You see that really big crack down her gem? That's what gems look like when they're really, really hurt. And I think it was the destabilizer that Peridot used to poof Garnet, Amethyst, and Pearl. They're not cracked like she is. And the destabilizer doesn't work on me, Dad. That's how we escaped the ship the first time. I broke it when Connie and me found it in the kindergarten." Stephen looked up at his dad, a small smile on his face. I don't know if she'll ever even come out of her gym again, but she can't hurt me. Greg gave himself a few seconds. He stood up straight again and nodded his other hand around Stephen's, sandwiching his son's hand between his. Fingers tense, he pulled Stephen up with him. Stephen went without a struggle.
Sorry, your old dad gets worried when he's tired.
His eyes crinkled with a smile.
I was up until 5 this morning trying to fix the van's engine. Poor thing gave out in the middle of the night. Probably should stop running the heater full blast once it gets chilly. I ought to invest in sweaters.
The engine's broken? Connie asked with an edge to her voice. She hopped back and forth on her feet, eyes darting between Greg and Stephen.
No, it's fixed. That's what I was up until 5 doing.
Greg released Stephen's hand. He plunged his own into his pocket, fishing for the car keys.
Well, I think so at least. It got me over here.
Stephen laughed. Yeah, that's when me and Connie went to bed too. The rest of the time we were sitting here watching the gyms. Even Lion came to keep watch. Except he stepped on Amethyst's cushion and now it's got a big lion paw print on it. The three of them jumped at the shrill ring from Connie's bag. Connie tensed, blushed, and fumbled for her phone. She hastily clicked it open, cupping her mouth over the receiver as she spoke in clipped tones. She nodded twice and snapped it shut. I'm really sorry, Stephen, but I have to go right now. My mom's... She looked between Stephen and Greg, eyes falling steadily to the circle of gyms. I know this is really important, and I really wish I could stay and help, and... She fumbled for words, hands twisting. It's just my parents might not let me come back if they think I'm breaking the rules here. But I'm gonna ask them if I can come over again tonight and help. I'm gonna convince them. I'll be here, I promise. Stephen nodded and dismissed her with a wave. Don't you worry. I'll probably be stuck like this for a while anyway. Pearl takes a long time to regenerate, and so does Amethyst when she tries hard. He lowered a hand to the floor, easing himself down. Stephen crossed his legs beneath him. It'll just be like they're sleeping for a while. First I got a sleepover with you, now I've got a sleepover with the gyms. Connie nodded eagerly, apprehension still burning in her eyes. All right, but call me if anything happens.
And call me,
Greg interjected.
I will turn the van right around and be here. Sorry, Connie.
No, same, she insisted. Her hands worried at the faint specks of mud they'd been unable to remove from her nightgown. Seriously, Stephen, let us know. He raised a hand to her, brandishing a thumbs up. Will do.
And if it gets too dangerous, just grab the gyms and run out of the house. Trust your gut. Garnet used to tell me how your mom won because she knew when to retreat from a battle.
The advice would have sounded wiser if not for the crack in Greg's voice. Stephen crossed his arms over his chest and huffed. Amethyst, do you think Dad and Connie should stop worrying about me and get going? He leaned over to Amethyst's pillow, taking her gym in hand and wiggling it up and down. He lowered his voice and spoke into the gym. Yeah, man, Stephen's totally got this. He swung around to Pearl's pillow. Indeed, now get going before Connie is late. Lateness and messiness are the worst possible thing. Greg gave a light chuckle. His tight mouth eased.
All right. Gyms, we're going. Don't go summoning your weapons on us.
Stephen rolled onto his stomach and lifted Ruby and Sapphire. Good, we thought so. Stephen waved them off without turning around as they bid goodbye. He didn't turn when he heard the screen door close or the van start. He only shifted to his side once the van's huffs and bumbles receded into the distance, too far away to hear. The smile on his face fell away. He laid on the grimy floor, the edges of his sandals scuffing the ground. He held his breath and didn't move. It was his hope he'd see some slight wiggle, some tiny glimmer from the lifeless gems. Seconds ticked away, and they didn't budge. Hey, Amethyst, if you regenerate now, I'll make us both lunch. Stephen hopped up, arms thrown wide to the gym. It'll be great, a huge sandwich for both of us, and I'll make it with everything in the fridge. Hot dogs, mac and cheese, nachos, ice cream. I'll get some donuts from the big donut and put those on too. His hands dropped, teeth pressed anxiously together. I'll even put motor oil on it. Pearl says I shouldn't eat that, but it'll be my treat. He froze, waited, and stepped closer to Amethyst's gem. Okay. take your time. He spun. Pearl, look at this mess Connie and me made making breakfast. He twisted to the kitchen, arms wide in presentation. Most surfaces were coated in a fine white powder. Spatulas were stacked like Lincoln logs. Drips of batter peppered the floor, and 4 enormous, floury paw prints circled the table. 3 mixing bowls towered high on the counter, each half filled with a yellowed slurry. Half a carton of eggs had been ditched in the sink, all cracked or leaking goo. It had been a joint effort between Stephen accidentally spilling a quart of water and Connie slipping on it while carrying the egg carton. A plate of a dozen waffles sat almost untouched on the table. After the distracted frenzy of prepping enough breakfast for 4, neither Connie nor Stephen found themselves very hungry at all. They'd laid out the maple syrup and butter, now gently melting, on the table set for no one. I'll help you clean it up, Pearl. You can tell me where all the bowls go, and tell me why it's bad to make messes in the first place. He raised a hand to his neck. Honestly, I don't remember where we got the spatulas from. You like cleaning up spatulas. The silent stone caught only a glimmer of sunlight in return. Garnet? Stephen twisted back and forth between the filthy kitchen and the gym circle. You should just come back anyway. You don't like being split up, right? So just come back already. He collapsed on the floor and scratched away a dirt stain from his pants. Only the sound of his breathing filled his ears. I don't like waiting. Still slumped, he spared a small glance to the crate. Peridot? It didn't answer him. If you were here, I'd talk to you. And I'd tell you about all the cool and awesome things on Earth. I bet no one ever told you about them. He wrung his hands. My dad and Connie just left. I think you'd like them. I like them. They're really great. With a huff, Stephen propelled himself to his feet. He stalked over to Amethyst's cushion and hoisted her gem in the air. Yo, Stephen, you don't need to be talking to losers when you have us. Let's go make a huge mess because trash is awesome. He lowered her gently and snagged Pearl. You most certainly will not. Amethyst and Stephen, go clean up all the messes everywhere. Stephen shined her quickly on his shirt before placing her back down. He lifted up Garnet's cushion entirely. Focus, Gems. We can't be arguing about pointless things right now. We need to focus on the mission, and that's... He faltered. His arms gave way, lowering the cushion back onto the dusty floor. Stephen turned on his heels, dog crate in view. Hurting Peridot, I guess. He touched a gentle hand to the crate's corner, floating in the silence. He rubbed his hand down the side. I wonder why they did this to you.